Hard to hear.
Basically, reentry means the transition from incarceration to a life in the community. Recovery refers to the act or the process of recovering from an illness or other substantial situation. Therefore, reentry recovery simply refers to the recovery from having been incarcerated. Very long story short, I did not understand that the death of my mother actually was a traumatic event. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's talk about what is trauma.
Dr.
Trauma
Smith,
is the unique individual
Dr. Smith,
experience of continuing conditions in which an individual's ability to integrate his or her
Dr.
emotions.
Smith.
Yeah, I'm not controlling it.
Okay, we can't hear.
Either an
We
objective
don't hear well.
or subjective threat
Okay,
to his or her bodily integrity,
okay.
and
Thank you. Thank you
basically,
for answering.
trauma can paralyze you. It can emotionally allow you not to function in a way that you have traditionally functioned. Traumatic event basically just means that you can evolve in a singular experience or enduring repeated events that completely overwhelm an individual's ability to cope or integrate the ideas and emotions evolved in that experience. I I think that a very simplified way of looking at trauma is it's something that again paralyzes you emotionally to the point of sometimes not functioning. There are other situations where people experience trauma and their mind actually protects them from even remembering those traumatic events. That's just how powerful trauma and traumatic events can be for a person. Um, Now, let's talk about my story a little bit and what it means to for me to have recovered from that. Um, my childhood is what most people would consider a normal childhood. I had mom, I had a dad. I was living on a very large farm in Alabama. I had siblings, and basically, I had again what is referred to as a normal childhood. What did happen in my childhood that I did not recognize as a traumatic event is that one day my sister and I we came home from school. Again, just a regular day. My dad met us and said, "Your mom got sick, and we took her to the hospital. So I'm going to take you guys to see her." Again, in my mind and in my memory, an extremely normal day, an extremely normal situation. We went to the hospital. We saw my mom. She looked normal. She sounded normal. We had a very normal conversation. Um, when we were leaving the hospital, she said for me and my sister to go home and be good for my father. That was actually the last time that I saw my mother alive. I had no idea as a 10-year old that I had been uh, so severely impacted by something that seems to be a normal daily occurrence. People die on a daily, hourly, um, minute basis, and it is not necessarily traumatic in a normal sense, but it is impactful to those that are close, to those that love and have a bond with those individuals. It can either be seen as a part of life or it can be seen as traumatic. I did not see it as traumatic. However, in retrospect, and after having a lot of conversations with therapists and counselors, I did not walk away uh, from that situation uh, feeling normal. I did not realize that I wasn't feeling normal. but I was not. So I went through the rest of my life basically just living what I thought was normal. Um, but it appears that I suffered from severe abandonment from that situation. One of the reasons, after many, many years um, of thinking about this and having conversations, one of the reasons I felt abandoned is that I did not have any conversations about the transition from, oh, your mother's in the hospital, she's fine, having a conversation with her, to unfortunately your mother passed away. I had a Christian upbringing, so the conversations around my mother going to heaven, the conversations around she didn't leave you, she had an aneurysm and died, none of that ever happened. So I really went from a space of your mother's fine to she disappeared. She just literally was not there. There was a funeral. I did go to the funeral. There was one experience that stuck in my mind, and that was of me attempting to touch my mother. I attempted to touch her face, her cheeks, because I remembered she had very soft cheeks, and I, from time to time, would go to sleep just playing with her, rubbing on her cheeks. I attempted to do that with her in her casket, and I couldn't. I couldn't. I just remember trying and pressing, and I wasn't able to touch her face. I didn't talk about it. I didn't think about it until several years later. I remember asking my dad, um, "Did did mom have a glass over her?" I remember there's such a thing as glass over, people that are in their casket. And he said no. And then he said, why? And I said, because I tried really hard and I keep just remember pressing my hand and wanting to touch her face, and I couldn't. My father's response to me at that time, which has resonated with me the rest of my life, was that I'm sure that you couldn't touch her because she wanted you to remember her the way she was. And if you would have touched her, her face would have been hard and it would have been cold and it would have frightened you. So one, she was protecting you from frightening you, and also she wanted you to remember her uh, with the soft cheeks and you touching her. And I took that into adulthood. I took that um, into my memory of my mom. And it was really difficult because at 10, as I got into my 20s and 30s and 40s and now 50s, um, I just remember all of the other memories of her would fade, and just I would have again these little panicky moments like, oh my God, I'm not going to remember the 10 years that I did have with my mother. But I do, and I have gained an understanding of that. But what those internal feelings of abandonment did as an adult is it made me want to please people. It made me want to be a yes person. It was a great time to know me because anything you wanted, I would have attempted to get because I didn't want the people that I met and bonded with to leave me, not understanding again that that had nothing to do with love. It had nothing to do with affection. It had nothing to do with someone caring. It had everything to do with me experiencing abandonment from something that really wasn't even abandonment. It's created this specific drive in me to really care about young people and care about conversations. I have this heightened sense of human services, in which I mentioned I have a degree in it, but also just the human experience, the life experience. And it's really important to me to share with any parent or anybody that I meet. It's important to have conversations. It's important to have conversations with young people about death, about traumatic experiences, because you don't want to leave them feeling the guilt. You don't want them feeling that they caused something, or back to my situation, or that if I don't go to the extremes, then you will leave me. And there's no way to control those feelings but by having conversations and having people talk about those feelings so that you don't grow up as an adult, as I did, having those abandonment issues. Um, those abandonment issues led to my incarceration. Um, I take, again, full responsibility for that. What that was embezzlement from not one, but two organizations. The first embezzlement, it didn't really profoundly affect my life. I um, did have a successful career and was able to pay a lawyer. And basically, the lawyer, did what lawyers do. I went for a court appearance. I received restitution, and uh, and that was that. I went through another situation where again I felt the need. I knew it was wrong. There was never a question in my mind to right and wrong. I've always known my actions, and again I am accountable and I take accountability for my actions. But in that moment, it was I have to do this. I have to pay for this. I have to take care of this. And I did. I did it. And the second time I had a bout of consciousness, it was in New York, and I resigned from the job. I returned to North Carolina, which was home at the time, and I resumed my life. I got another job. I uh, the Christian part of me prayed for forgiveness, and I thought that life, as as I knew it, I apologized and I went on. In 2002, that came to a screeching halt. Um, Unbeknownst to me, there was an extradition warrant out for my arrest, and an embezzlement warrant in the state of New York. As I said, I was in North Carolina. So at the time, the police showed up at my door one day, said, "Are you Sandra Smith? Do you have any dogs and anybody else in this house?" It quickly escalated to, uh, you know, put some clothes on and come with us. And I was arrested in Johnson County, North Carolina, and I waived my right to extradition. I was let out the next day, ROR uh, and bail, and I returned willingly to New York because in my mind it wasn't as bad as it was. Again, remember I said that our minds are very powerful, and we can convince ourselves of a whole lot of things that we can't convince other people of. So I had at that time convinced myself that I was going to go back to New York, all was going to be right with the world, and I would be home. Um, and I never went home. Nothing was ever right with the world again. I found myself in a courtroom with a bailiff yelling at a judge and attorneys that they needed to hurry up because the bus to Rikers was getting ready to leave. Next thing you know, I was at Rikers Island in total disbelief, still in denial, thinking to myself, "Oh, this is going to be fine." And I would be remiss to not say that everything that anyone has ever heard about Rikers Island, the reality of it is probably 10 times worse than what you see on SVU, on any television show, any person that has had that experience. It's very difficult to describe if you haven't lived. I saw someone die within 10 feet simply because the correctional officers did not believe that she was having an asthma attack. Um, the ability to walk out of a place like that, the ability to walk out in and of itself is pretty, uh, I'm very grateful that I was able to leave Rikers Island alive, but certainly with a great deal of trauma that I still carry today. But uh, thanks to some support, I am able to share that and not be triggered. But it is definitely something that never leaves you. You never forget something of that nature. During my time of incarceration, I was actually sent to every upstate female prison in the state of New York simply because they didn't really know what to do with me. It's one of those things where it's, well, you're educated, you're not, you don't have a criminal past except the same criminal behavior. Um, and I spent a lot of time at Rikers Island. I spent 9 months fighting and trying to get out on bail. I have come to understand and realize that that is not what was meant to happen. Um, and the entire trajectory of my life obviously changed after that. I spent a lot of time thinking and reflecting, and it was a counselor at the Taconic facility in upstate New York that said to me, do you understand that your entire childhood experience after 10 years old was riddled with trauma? And you have held that until now. And I was nearly 40 years old um, when I had that experience and that conversation. And literally, I think it was that night or the next day, all of these light bulbs just literally started coming on. And I saw my entire life in a different situation. Um, and that's where I would say that my recovery path from incarceration started. It started in incarceration with me being incarcerated. And a lot of times today, when we talk about programming, which I'll get to very shortly, um, it is very important to understand that reentry or successful reentry or reintegration into society oftentimes, more often than not, begins with incarceration. Um, I say that because it's so important for people to understand that we can't provide support services and not, internally provide services. And then when people are released, they have no support. So everything that they felt as part of their support system is gone unless there's a continuity of support for those individuals upon release. I was released from Rikers Island, or basically the New York State correction system, and I went to to work. I was released on work release. I actually had a job waiting for me. I had an apartment waiting for me in New York, and in that release, again, the freedom for me started with that conversation with the counselor. The release just really meant, now how do I construct a life that has totally been broken? And while it was um, a lot of great experiences and a lot of good life lived, um, I was not free. I had not been free um, since I suffered the trauma as a 10-year-old child. And so as complicated as that was, it was also pretty simple to me. It was, now you need to create a life, this life of freedom based on, what do you want to do now? What do you want to do moving forward? Do you want to utilize what you've learned through this experience to help people? Or do you want to get the heck out of here and never come back? The answer for me was both. I want to get the heck out of here and I will never come back. but I also chose to remember all of the people that I left in that in those multiple prisons, and also in Rikers Island, which is a jail. Um, and that was a very, again, complicated issue. All of the reentry things that we hear, inability to find a job, inability to find a place to live, inability to do the things that you want to do, they are our reality. And when I say our, I mean individuals that have been incarcerated. The amount of time doesn't matter. My amount of time was very short compared to most. It was a total of 18 months actually incarcerated and being shipped around facility to facility. But upon my return on work release, there was still parole. There were still um, very strict um, constraints that were put upon me as somebody that was on parole in the state of New York. Um, so one of the best things that happened was that I was released, and I had, again, people that were willing to help me, and I got a job at Medgar Evers College in New York. And that job allowed me the ability to work with youth, um, and to actually manage a grant program around overaged, undercredited high school students. And again, that's where the beginning of the journey started in the pieces. Well, the second part of the journey began, again, as I said, while I was incarcerated. But a very impactful part of that journey was being at that program. And I eventually learned to share my story. Um, Going back to Rikers Island for just a second, I was sitting at Rikers one day, and I felt really convicted to start writing. Something just literally came over me, and it was like, you need to start writing. You need to start writing this experience. And I literally every day, I have a commissary paper to this day where I turned that over and I just started writing any place that I could get paper from, um, and eventually had people mail me paper. But I started by writing on the back of that commissary paper. I had no idea at the time that I was writing my story. The story started with my mother giving birth to me, and I just kept writing. And I talked to myself, wrote to myself about every part of that experience, or as many of those experiences, um, behind bars that I could. Um, so let's fast forward. I got out, I got a job, I was doing relatively well. Um, and I decided, once I was off of parole, which was 6 years after the fact, I decided I wanted to move back closer to home, closer to Alabama, which is where I was born and raised. I moved to Atlanta and I got a job at Strayer University. At Strayer, I was promoted to dean, regional dean. I ended up here in Texas, at a location right off of Mopac at Strayer University, where I served as the academic dean for that facility. And I also had the opportunity to be a regional dean after that for a program within Strayer. Um, and at Strayer, I received a phone call in California, and I was told that um, I was being laid off with approximately 100 other individuals. And in that moment, I thought, oh, wow. And then again, there was this internal relief that was like, okay, now you're going to write a book. And I thought, what book? I don't know how to write a book. And literally, it came to me, go pull out the papers where you were asked to start writing. That's the book. That is what you're going to write, and that is what you're going to publish. And I now am the author of Choices. It's my true life story. It starts from the day I was born through my incarceration experience, but it ends with hope. And that's how I always end my incarceration story, with hope that at the end of the day, with some support, with some encouragement, with a whole lot of people praying for you, your life can actually be changed to something positive, and that you can become a help for other people. So my release, my back to life, the laying off, there was a lot of struggling with employment. Once I decided to leave New York, that was kind of a security, and I had not actually experienced the multiple um, issues that are related to um, someone trying to get a job with a felony background. And I have a lot of personal experience with that. I had offers of jobs, an organization actually, Houston Community College to be exact, literally created a position for me. And once human resources did a background check, even though I told them, I always told people up front, I didn't need to go through the, oh my God, you didn't share this with us. I always said, I have a felony record. Um, and they pulled it, and they were like, we don't care how awesome she is. She can't work here for another, I believe it was like 8 years or something crazy like that. Because it's several years after you're off paper, is what they call it, which means several years after parole can you only be employed there. But again, I'm a person that believes that everything happens for a reason. I was able to finish the book, I was able to publish it. And I think that had, again, I not gone through those struggles, I obviously wouldn't be able to do the work that I do now, which is peer support. So I consider myself on a lifelong journey to recovery. And this journey began with incarceration, with the specific traumas that I mentioned earlier. Um, of course, incarceration had its own traumas, and release has its own traumas. And then I thought about the before, during, and after, which actually led to me creating the term trauma. And so trauma, which was trademarked to me several years ago, is a series of three specific traumas culminating in one event. And in this conversation, that event was incarceration. But obviously, trauma can be referred to uh, things such as military service, being in a facility. And it begins before that event. And again, in this case, it was my incarceration. It began with my childhood. It can be accidents, it can be violence, it can be natural disasters. In my case, it was the death of my mother. During incarceration, obviously, your freedom is taken away. There is violence inside of prisons, there's abuse, and there is quite a bit of fear. And then after, there's the barriers that I mentioned to employment, housing, discrimination, probation, parole, just the systemic ills that we are beginning to try to address in this country. But there's a long way to go in order to really make a difference, to really reform. It has to start with the sequential intercept model that most people are familiar with. But that model starts in the community, and that model ends in the community. I personally chose to try to impact Intercept 4, which is the Reentry Intercept, and that is where I have committed to doing my work. But trauma is a part of the training that I helped conceptualize. Well, I did conceptualize, but helped develop while working at where I work now at Via Hope. And basically, at this point, if you have questions in the chat box, hopefully you have been um, putting those questions, and I will respond to those questions during this recording being presented. during this conference. And I'm happy to also respond to any questions. I will put my email address, my personal website, in addition to working full-time at Via Hope. I also do consulting work. I travel to prisons. I share my story. I promote my book, Choices, My True Story, which talks about the incarceration. But the most important part about any story is the hope that people can successfully reenter, that there are support systems, there are people like myself that are committed to making sure that there are support mechanisms for those that reenter into society. There's a lot of work going on now with prison reform, peer specialists, which is really important. And now that the state of Texas and nationally, it is possible to take our training. We are working on making it possible to be certified nationally, and we're really close, and hopefully we'll have an announcement about that soon. But if you follow us via hope.org, and there's a way to sign up for our newsletters, all the information about all the trainings that we've created specific to trauma, specific to reentry, and the work that we're doing. I would encourage you to please sign up at the bottom of our website to get our newsletter. Sandra.smith@viahope.org is a way to email me directly. It has been a pleasure to be able to share my recovery from incarceration and reentry story with you. Hoping to have a lot of new and exciting information regarding reentry and some partnerships and all of the things that we have done. We recently received a $2.2 million HRSA Health Services Resource Administration grant around providing peer support in different areas. And one of those areas includes reentry. So thank you so much for joining me today. I am very excited to be here. And again, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to respond. Thank you and have an awesome day. Hello, I'm Dr. Sandra Smith.
Dr. Smith, that was simply amazing. What an amazing story that you have. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. So welcome back, everyone. Let's start our question and answer session. We're going to do our very, very best to allow everyone to get their questions in and answer as many questions as possible. If you would like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand and you'll be unmuted so that you can share your questions or comments with Dr. Smith. Now, if you would all please help me welcome Dr. Sandra Smith. And if the first person who would like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you. And that would be Mr. Donald Seamster.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
My question is, by your mother passing away so early in your life, what did it take for you to forgive her?
Well, she didn't choose to die. She had an aneurysm. So I think that's an interesting question, because a lot of the trauma, again, involved in me understanding all the things that had happened from the 10 years old to it was like 36 years old, was really around grasping the magnitude of not having that support, not because my family didn't care, but just because of the awareness of mental health and the awareness of needing to have conversations around abandonment. And the idea that someone's mother dies is not an intentional act that requires forgiveness. It's simply understanding that she didn't abandon you. It's understanding that she didn't mean to leave you, understanding death, and understanding that I had just somewhere deep down inside of me try to protect myself because I wanted love and I wanted, that thing that only a mother can give, but not understanding that that couldn't come from anywhere else. So there wasn't really a need to forgive my mother. She didn't do anything to me. She was in the yard doing yard work and had an aneurysm. Actually, she had a stroke. They took her to the hospital and she had an aneurysm that night after we left. And so the aneurysm technically is what she died from. But there wasn't a need for forgiveness. I needed to forgive myself. I needed to get to a place where I could forgive myself and let all of the things that I had been holding inside go, if that makes any sense. But I didn't need to forgive her. She didn't do anything to be forgiven for.
Thank you for that answer, Dr. Smith. Next, we have Miss Monica Reyes. Miss Reyes, if you'll go ahead and unmute yourself. You're still muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering, I appreciate you sharing your story and giving information about peer specialists. I'm a certified family partner with Via Hope as well. My question is, my husband was incarcerated for 11 years and he's still on paper. Do you see the same challenges for men coming out, Black men coming out of the prison system, and the lack of mental health services to those who are incarcerated coming out into the community?
Absolutely. A lot of the research shows that, obviously more women are being incarcerated now at an alarming rate. That's one of the statistics that we need to always be aware of. But because of the stigma that's already attached to particularly African-American men, it makes it sometimes more difficult. Oftentimes, just the ability to do the things I talked about during the video, the ability to get a job, the ability to just, families have sometimes a tendency to be done, especially if, depending on the number of times someone may have been incarcerated, the nature of the incarceration, the inability to understand what systemically is happening in this country. All of that together, it's hard. It is very hard for men. I wouldn't say more difficult, but definitely as equally as difficult, because the system is the same system. There is no discrimination as far as males and females. And as I said, I consider myself extremely lucky.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, right. I agree with that. And I feel like the trauma that happens in prison for men and women, we don't have enough systems out here to do a real reentry programs for, just the mental health or the family therapy that's needed afterwards. It's not there. So it helps a lot of families to just deteriorate, honestly. So thank you for your story. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. I would like to say that we are trying really hard. I did mention some promising, we always, again, we want to go with the hope part of all of this, is there are a lot of promising programs and partnerships and opportunities. I am a big believer in inReach, which means, again, that we need to reach people while they're in, but we also need to support them on the way out and through the return process. And I just believe that if we can have people have those conversations in a safe environment and start the healing process, because it is possible to heal from trauma, but you can't heal if you're not aware. There is no way for me to get to where I am today if someone hadn't literally said to me, Your mother didn't intend to leave you. She died. I mean, something that simple. I don't know that I was in a place before to receive that and understand what it meant, but we really have to start having those conversations again. Males, females, children, it really, again, it doesn't matter. Trauma doesn't discriminate, but it infiltrates our lives, and not understanding that someone has been through a traumatic experience and putting name into it really just makes it worse for that person and for our society, because until we all start to heal, then we're just, you know, it's just that whole recidivism, recycling of trauma, as far as I'm concerned.
So well stated. Next question we have is from Ms. Shannon Karkar. If you'll go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, how is everybody? And Ms. Sandra, thank you so much again for doing what you do. My sister, we really appreciate it. My question is, I'm also in the peer movement, running a consumer operated service. And part of what we see with people who are coming back and doing that reentry is we can't find the resources. And I know that you spoke about it. The other sister, Monica, spoke about it. But how can we, what is the single point of entry, if there is one, in the Austin area or surrounding areas, or, you know, where can a person go to say, this is where we need to start to help you on that road to getting back on track?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know that there's a single point of entry. One of the things that we're working on, when I say we, I'll say the city of Austin recently awarded a grant to an organization specifically for that purpose, right? There is a awareness around the fact that we really have to find a one-stop shop. So basically what happened is that the city of Austin awarded funds to be able to come up with a way for us to be able to establish a point of contact, a point of entry, a concerted effort, if you will, to bring all of these resources together. Again, you can do the research and it'll tell you a list, right? There's a whole list of needs that people have when they're returning from incarceration. The problem with that is oftentimes those resources are, first of all, out of date. Secondly, it's not a one size fits all. What I needed when I got out is not necessarily going to be what you need, Shannon, or what Don needs, or what anybody needs. So being able to have, again, in my opinion, peer support actually makes that connectivity, right? If I can go into the prisons, because again, I believe in reach, and then the whole continuity of services from inside to outside, it's going to profoundly impact a person's ability to stay out. The key here is to reduce recidivism. The key is to be able to provide resources for those people so that they don't go back to the people, places, and things that they know, which is what's going to keep them out. So I don't know if there's a point of entry. I know there's just a lot of conversations around what it would look like to be able to send people to one place to get all of the services. That's my lottery wish, right? Literally, I want to hit the lottery and be able to create a larger version of the one-stop shop. And that would start with peer support. That would start with somebody that's been incarcerated, like myself, saying to somebody that's incarcerated, it's actually possible for this to be okay. And then bring in the clinical aspects if needed, bring in the housing and the jobs. But the thing that we always forget is that until that person deals with that trauma, you can put them in a house, you can put them in a job, you can put them anywhere that you want to put them, but until they deal with the stuff, as we all call it, until we deal with the root of the problem, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice to go back to the things that I know, because nobody's giving me anything different. Nobody's showing me that there's a possibility to do things different. And, you know, livable wages, it's something, Shannon, you know, that we're working on when it comes to peer support. It's being able to sustain my life. But there's also this thing called quality of life. If people are just trying to get by and they can't, then again, what options do they have? We're not giving people options to go live a sustained, productive life. Like, I don't even know what productive member of society is. I used to say to people all the time, what does that mean? I want a quality of life. And once I have a quality of life, then maybe I can go be that productive member of society that society keeps putting on me as just a human being that has, one, done their time according to what society says. If you've done your time, which those of us who've been incarcerated know that that's never, you will never, regardless of what your sentence was, it is a lifetime of being incarcerated because society doesn't actually function in the way that it says that it functions. That's a whole nother webinar. But Shannon, to answer your question, I don't know that there's a single point. I think that organizations like yours, the recovery community organizations, and are beginning to do a lot of work and making, you know, partnerships are huge. Partnerships to be able to provide people with those services are really, really huge. We don't have a one-stop shop, but my hope is that we can get closer and be able to give people the end reach, which gives them the end result of being able to start healing from trauma and live productive lives. That was a long answer, but it's it's not simple. It's a really complicated
Thanks
issue.
so much.
Okay,
You're
our
welcome.
next, thank you. Our next question is coming from Miss Sonia Hartman.
Hi, and thank you for sharing your journey. And actually, you kind of answered my question with the questions that Monica asked and Ms. Sharon asked, because mine was about programming for those that are reentering, especially those that are not able to get housing or work. I work in a program that specifically works with children with mental health challenges, but we also work with their parents. It's the same program that Monica works with. And we struggle with trying to connect parents who need those basic needs and those basic necessities met, especially if they have a criminal record. But Sharon asked a question about the single point of entry. Monica asked about the mental health. So that basically answered my question and the answer that you gave, Ms. Sharon. But I did want to just say thank you for sharing your journey with us. And we've worked with Via Hope before, and so I know it's a great program, and they're blessed to have you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Our next question is coming from Minister Sonia Hosey. And you're muted. There we go, unmuted.
Okay, thank you so much. That was powerful, Sandra. One of the questions that I have is, what do you think the faith community can do? Limited funds, of course, we provide the spiritual aspect, but what do you think that we can do as a faith community?
That's a big one. that's a big question. But what I really think the faith-based community can do is advocate for people's mental health. One of the reasons I grew up again in the country and a huge denomination, and there is something ingrained in our communities that there's something wrong with even talking about mental health. There's something wrong. Go pray about it and it's going to be fine. And that doesn't work. I think if we could have more churches providing resources, but by resources, I mean to encourage people to seek professional help if they need it, to not make it this taboo, thing that we don't talk about. That's your crazy uncle, stay away from him. How about we embrace my crazy uncle and get him some help? How about we provide him with the ability to get out of that hole that we sometimes as family members and church members put those people in those holes. So primarily be an advocate for mental health, have people seek help. And there's nothing wrong with, I think, pastors, counseling, but I think they need to be qualified to provide that counseling. I think they need to have certifications and licensure. And if they're not willing to have that, then they should be able to refer those people to, again, folk that are qualified to really provide help. Because if you don't, you end up doing more harm. And I can't even tell you how passionate I am about the idea that I can that prayer alone will fix it. Can it? Absolutely. Am I a believer? Absolutely. But I also believe that we were given gifts and talents to be able to help each other. And in order to be able to do that, I need to get the proper training to be able to help people so that I do no harm. So for me, the number one in the faith-based community is to get some training and some certification and be an advocate for mental health for the people that they're serving and the people that they're parishioners for and to.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And our next question is coming from Miss Angela Hicks Davis. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very good, very good. And I am a minister, chaplain, and I do a lot of community work as well. And my question is, and I'm also a certified Christian counselor, but my question was, I was listening to the other lady speak, and I was hearing you speak about you're working on, or they're working on different things, but I kind of want to see were they working on things, or did they help in the prison as far as giving you guidance, helping you with the trauma? I know we have the chaplains in the prisons as well. Did you receive any of that type of service, or are they able to let people in to come and offer that in the prison?
What I received, so a part of the story that I didn't share is that I ended up at it's called KSAT in New York. It's a comprehensive alcohol and substance abuse treatment facility. And I never used substances in my life. I actually had a counselor encourage me strongly, like literally asking me a question 5 times. And the question was, have you ever done drugs? And I was like, no. And she was like, oh, I see here you went to college. Everybody in college smoked marijuana. And I was like, well, I smoked a joint once. And she said, great. You're gonna go to KSAT. And I was like, what? But I also was like, guess what? It's gonna get me out of here. So if you want to label me as someone that has substance use issues, see ya later. And so no, I didn't receive the counseling that I needed, but by default, going to this KSAT program and having a counselor literally look at me and say, smoking a joint doesn't make you an addict. What are you doing here? And I told her, and that's literally how the conversation started with, I really want you to think about it, but I don't think you're here for any reason other than trauma. I think you're here because you don't have an understanding, or as a child, the dots never connected that your mother didn't leave you. There was no abandonment left. And so without having that conversation, I don't know if the trajectory of my life would have changed, but there definitely was no counseling until I was sent to this program as a way to get me out of this system. I do have to say one thing about the system. One of the reasons they wanted me out was because I had an education. They wanted me out because of some things that I did advocate for while in there, but also once you start to advocate for yourself, and particularly for other people, for something as simple as you can't breathe, it's too hot and we need some type of air, and writing letters, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, we don't need that. We don't need that trouble. So then they figure out how to hurry you up and get you out of the system. I'm not mad about that, but I'm just saying is systemically, the system's not made to help you. The system is not made to give you counseling. The system's not made to do anything other than to keep you there. This is the system as we know it is, it's about money. It's not about saving lives. It is a capitalistic investment in this country. And so we get the opportunity to criminalize people that do have mental health issues, people that do have addiction and substance use issues, and we turn that into a profit. And that's what's happening when we talk about the system. We're talking about taking human beings and turning them into money-making situations.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
So basically, our if you're in there and you need help, you can't get it until you actually get out of there, if you get out of there.
There are changes. There are programs. The HRSA grant that I mentioned, we are literally in the process of getting peer specialists into the jails. There are counseling, but again, it's around programming, and it's around a lot of noise about the inability to be able to have programming. So everything is about programming, especially in prisons. And it's really just, if you're lucky enough, I was lucky enough to get shoved through, and they just literally figured out how to get me out. Again, I'm not upset about it, but I'm also not going to be quiet about it because it's not okay. Because it's lives that we're losing, literally. Like I said, it's people's lives, and we don't really understand that until you can kind of get a glimpse from the inside, and then you come out and you're one of those big mouth people like myself and a lot of other advocates that I know and work with. But no, there's not a lot of help. It's starting to change, but it is abysmal what happens to people that don't have resources and advocacy.
So
Dr.
how do
Smith,
the chaplains help in the prison?
I'm sorry, what was?
How are the chaplains helping in the prison?
Chaplains are able to help by bringing people in. And I say to people all the time, one of the best ways to get into prisons, because I hear people say that, especially people that have a record and people that may still be on probation, but they want to give back. One of the best ways to get back into prison is through the chaplains. The chaplains, it's how I get into Ohio prisons. It's how I got back into a New York prison. It's how I get into jails here. My length of time out now, next year will be 20 years, which is also a factor, but chaplains can help by being able to provide programming. Obviously, they don't have as much influence as we would like, but they do have a lot of influence, and they can help to establish programs. If chaplains can reach out to peer organizations, when I talk about partnerships, if we could link chaplains with peer organizations that can get into the jails and be able to provide peer support, to be able to get into jails and provide formalized peer support. I know there's a lot of informal peer support going on, but I have to express that I am an advocate for, again, people that are certified, properly trained, to be able to provide that peer support. If chaplains can help navigate the system and get those people in, then there's a huge amount of progress that can be made.
Thank you so much for all of those wonderful answers, Dr. Smith. We have about 9 minutes left, and we have a few more questions that we're able to take. So the next question is coming from Gwen Cubitt. And if you'll go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, I'm Gwen, and it was really great to sit through your presentation, Dr. Smith. And I do have a couple of questions. And so, are you familiar with the prisons system here in Texas?
A little, not a lot.
Okay.
Obviously, I know, I am working with Travis County Jail, and I work with Melissa Shearer up at the Travis County Mental Health Public Defender's Office. So systemically, honestly, there's not a lot of difference, but I'm not as familiar with Texas as I am with where I actually spent time.
Right. So I just want to let me just say that I am also recovering from the Texas prison system and have been for multiple years. So I know, the process. And so I was wanting to know, because, I know they have peer specialists. And so I think that term is being used broadly because they have peer specialists that work with people who have mental illness. They have peer specialists who work with individuals who have substance abuse. And so now your idea is to have peer specialists who are people who have gotten out of incarceration and then they go back in to help guide other people. Is that what you're
Right.
talking about?
Yeah, so right now there are literally, there are now 3 certifications. There was a mental health peer specialist. There are mental health peer specialists. There are substance abuse peer specialists, and now there are reentry peer specialists. The majority of reentry peer specialists, just as a note of, again, data, the majority of people that are incarcerated, 80% have had a mental health or substance use challenge at some point in their life, or co-occurring, which just means that both at the same time. So being a reentry peer specialist literally means that you've been through the system, you've been incarcerated through a system, any system, it doesn't matter. But the reentry peer specialist certification was specifically designed to address trauma. And again, those traumas that I mentioned before, during, and after incarceration. And so there is no, I don't want to say there's not a comparison. They're just different. There are different levels of experience. So the only difference in peer specialists is their experience. And so my pathway, which there are multiple pathways to recovery from whatever your challenge may have been, but they all just speak specifically to that experience, if that makes sense. So there's 3 certifications, and then there's the family partner certification, which is specific to parents of children that have mental health challenges, and the 4th certification is the supervisor certification through the state, through the Texas Certification Board. I'll put it that way.
And we can have those, that information included in our um, presentation afterwards for people to go back and reference, correct?
Okay, so
Yes.
so just one more final part to my question then, so I can be clear. So the reentry specialist is going to also be able to speak to the mental health and the substance abuse issues of the individual.
Only if that's their experience. So
Oh, okay,
again, I can only speak to you from my lived experience. The whole idea of support and certified peer specialists is that they're speaking to you based on their lived experience.
okay,
I can't give you knowledge around something that I haven't experienced. I can give you book knowledge, but that's the same as, you know, a doctor graduates, but do you want him to cut on you until he has actually experienced it? So it's really
mhm,
just about the experience and the lived experience that a person can provide. And they could, but they may not. So again, that's one of those, it just depends on what background they're coming with. But they also have the knowledge to refer and to give people support in whatever area that they need, because that's what they're trained to do, is to be able to provide those resources.
Right. We have about 4 minutes left. So I'm going to call on Miss Shushan Thomas, and please make your question very brief, only one question so that we can get the last person in. And if you'll go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for your information. That was really beneficial. I do have, my question is very specific, and with your experience, you may be in a better position to answer. Shortly after slavery, as you know, the 13th Amendment was ratified and passed. And as most people, most Blacks in the United States are aware of, a large portion of our men in the prime of their life are incarcerated or in some form of the incarceration system, which limits them from the American dream and success and prosperity and to be fathers. My question is this: with the current pathway culturally and socially that we have with systemic racism, is there any way that as parents, family members, clergy, and as a community, that we can form a stronger base to deter, especially our male and our younger Black population, because now it's affecting our females also, to get them on a more productive pathway to where incarceration and confinement and loss of freedom is not so much a fundamental base of our culture?
Yeah, that's another pretty loaded question.
I apologize.
Oh no, there's nothing to apologize for. It is where we are. It's where we are in this country, but the interesting part is it's where we've always been. You know, the death of George Floyd on the television in a time of uh, COVID, where people were just, it was in your face, and it kind of just reignited. It reignited. It didn't start anything new. Um, you know, Black males have been slaughtered disproportionately in this country forever. It's not new. It's not. I think for me, it's really just about education. Everything for me goes back to education. Everything for me is about community and support and advocacy, and just being able to come together, as you stated. We have to be able to come together as a society. African Americans represent less than 15% of this country. We can't advocate for ourselves by ourselves. There has to be an understanding and a recognition there has to be an ability for that support to come from other sources. So I really can't name anything other than being able to advocate and be loud about that advocacy, and to be able to, again, resources, education. Like, we have to be able to tell our little brown girls and boys that they're okay, that they're good, that they're positive. And all of those reaffirmations lead to our babies growing up to be adults that really understand where they come from and history. The education is about the history as well, and being proud and being bold. It sounds simple and cliche-ish, but that's my answer.
Well, folks, we've run out of time.
I'm
Barb,
sorry.
I apologize for you not being able to get your question in, but if you go through the Hoover app, you should be able to contact Dr. Smith and maybe ask her a question or two. So with that being said, I would like to thank Dr. Sandra Smith so much for sharing your knowledge and insight with us. Thank you for sharing your journey that you have gone on and continue to walk to help other people. We so appreciate your work that you are doing. Many thanks to all of you for joining us today. Please take a few minutes to complete the workshop survey. It helps us to know how we're doing. If you're seeking CEUs, remember that your forms will be in the survey. The links are going to be in the chat. Now, we have just found out that the chat number is incorrect. So if you go through the Hoover app, you will be able to find your surveys. Thanks again to everyone who joined us on today. Thank you again, Dr. Sandra Smith, and everyone, please continue to stay safe. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of the conference. It's going to be a blast.